In the grim darkness of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the Chaos Space Marines represent a haunting reminder of the duality of faith and power. Once the proud defenders of humanity, these fallen warriors turned their backs on their oaths, seduced by the promises of chaos and the raw might of the warp. But this story isn't just about their descent. It's about the possibility, however faint, of redemption. Can a Chaos Space Marine truly break free from the grasp of the ruinous powers? To understand this question, we must first set the stage. The galaxy of the 41st millennium is a place of unrelenting war, ruled by a decaying Imperium that venerates the Emperor of mankind as its god. Chaos, a malevolent force born from the collective emotions of sentient beings, stands as its antithesis. Within this cosmic struggle, Chaos Space Marines are both victims and villains, former champions of humanity who succumb to their own flaws, desires, or ambition, becoming pawns of the very forces they sought to control. The relationship between Chaos and its champions is paradoxical. It grants power beyond imagining, immortality, unrestrained strength, and mastery over the impossible. Yet, the price is the loss of self. The Chaos Gods, known as the Ruinous Powers, demand absolute servitude. To serve them is to surrender one's soul, transforming the once proud Astartes into little more than tools of destruction and despair. But is this transformation irreversible? Are these fallen warriors doomed to eternal damnation? Or can the spark of humanity buried deep within them be reignited? This is not just a story of treachery or corruption. It is also one of tragedy and unanswered questions. Each Chaos Space Marine has their reasons for turning away from the light of the Emperor. Some were betrayed by the Imperium they once served. Others sought knowledge or strength to achieve noble, if misguided, goals. The motivations are as diverse as the traitor legions themselves. The concept of redemption in Warhammer 40,000 is almost alien. Forgiveness is scarce, and mercy is seen as weakness. The Imperium has no tolerance for heretics, and Chaos punishes failure with a cruelty that defies comprehension. Even so, scattered tales of atonement persist, whispers of warriors who defied the gods they served, of those who sought to undo the harm they caused. These rare instances raise a profound question. Is the grip of chaos truly unbreakable, or is there a path back to the light? This exploration begins in the fires of the Horus Heresy, a galaxy-spanning civil war that shattered the unity of the Imperium and gave birth to the Chaos Space Marines. But the story stretches far beyond those ancient battles, encompassing millennia of bloodshed, intrigue, and suffering. From the shadowed corridors of the Eye of Terror to the desolate battlefields of the present day, we will unravel the tale of these fallen warriors, their struggles, and the elusive hope for redemption. As we delve deeper, remember this. Chaos is not just an external force. It is the manifestation of internal flaws, fears, and desires. Understanding the Chaos Space Marines means confronting the darkest corners of the human soul, where ambition collides with despair and hope battles against corruption. The question isn't just whether they can escape chaos, it's whether they even want to. With this foundation laid, we now turn to the central figures of this story, the Chaos Space Marines themselves. Who are they, and what drives them to embrace the path of damnation? The answers will illuminate both their fall and the faint glimmers of a way back. The galaxy of Warhammer 40,000 is shaped by countless factions and individuals, but few embody the complexity and darkness of the Chaos Space Marines. Central to their story are several key groups and entities, each playing a distinct role in shaping the eternal struggle between the forces of chaos and the fleeting remnants of hope that linger within them. To understand whether there is a path back from chaos, we must first identify the main players in this grim tale. First and foremost are the Chaos Space Marines themselves, the corrupted Astartes who have pledged their allegiance to the ruinous powers. These warriors represent a twisted mirror of the Emperor's vision, their once pristine armor now adorned with unholy symbols and their hearts consumed by the very powers they sought to master. They are not a unified force, but a collection of fragmented legions, war bands, and renegades, each bound to chaos in its own way. From vast fleets to isolated enclaves, they operate with the singular purpose of spreading chaos and destruction, driven by motives as diverse as their origins. Complementing these warriors are the demons of the warp, the otherworldly entities that serve as manifestations of the Chaos God's will. These beings are both allies and masters to the Chaos Space Marines, emerging from the Imperium to bolster their efforts or claim their due. Each demon, regardless of its rank or origin, exerts an influence over the mortal warriors who summon them, blurring the line between partnership and domination. Their presence is a constant reminder of the power and peril of chaos, and they represent a force that the Chaos Space Marines can neither fully command nor escape. Within this framework are the mortal cultists who worship chaos with fanatical devotion. These individuals, often overlooked in favor of the towering Chaos Space Marines, play a crucial role as servants, acolytes, and cannon fodder. Their numbers are vast, ranging from unassuming civilians who secretly offer prayers to the gods of chaos to entire planetary populations consumed by corruption. They provide the manpower, resources, and sacrifices that fuel the ambitions of the Chaos Space Marines, binding mortal worlds to the agendas of the warp. The Chaos Gods themselves loom as omnipresent figures in this story. Though they rarely intervene directly, their influence permeates every action of their servants. Each god embodies a different aspect of chaos, offering their followers unique gifts and curses in exchange for servitude. These gods are both patrons and parasites, granting immense power while twisting their followers' desires to serve their own ends. Their motives are inscrutable, their plans vast, and their reach infinite, ensuring that no servant of chaos ever truly escapes their grasp. Opposing these forces, though not in allegiance, are the renegade Astartes who have rejected both the Imperium and chaos itself. These individuals and war bands walk a precarious path, neither bound to the Emperor nor enslaved to the ruinous powers. They are driven by personal agendas, ideals, or the hope of carving out an existence free from the shackles of larger forces. Their presence highlights the diversity of those who have turned from the Imperium and suggests the possibility, however slim, of breaking free from the grip of chaos. Also woven into this narrative are the Xenos races, who often find themselves caught in the crossfire of Chaos Space Marine campaigns. Though they may seem peripheral, their interactions with chaos provide important context. Some, like the Eldar, have a deep understanding of the warp and view the actions of chaos with equal parts dread and disdain. Others, such as the Orcs, revel in the chaos unleashed but remain unaligned with its cosmic forces. These interactions reveal how the Chaos Space Marines impact not just humanity, but the galaxy at large. A unique presence in this conflict is the warp itself, a living, ever-changing dimension of psychic energy that serves as the source of chaos. It is more than a backdrop. It is an active participant, shaping and being shaped by the thoughts and emotions of all sentient beings. For the Chaos Space Marines, the warp is both a weapon and a prison, granting them unparalleled power while ensuring their dependence on its volatile currents. Finally, there are the Loyalists, the Imperium of Man, its Inquisition, and its unyielding Adeptus Astartes chapters. While they are not the focus of this exploration, their role as relentless pursuers of heretics cannot be ignored. For the Chaos Space Marines, the Imperium is both a hated enemy and an inescapable part of their identity. The Loyalist Space Marines, in particular, serve as a constant reminder of what they once were and what they have lost, intensifying the internal struggle faced by some who question their allegiance to chaos. These key players form the intricate web of forces and entities that define the Chaos Space Marines and their place in the galaxy. Their interactions, alliances, and conflicts set the stage for the broader questions of loyalty, corruption, and redemption that we will explore. Each plays a role in determining whether these fallen warriors can ever truly escape the shadow of chaos, or if they are forever bound to its service. The descent of the Chaos Space Marines into corruption is rooted in a series of profound and interconnected events that span millennia. At its core, this phenomenon is a consequence of the galaxy's brutal reality, where loyalty, ambition, and survival are constantly tested by the overwhelming forces of chaos. To understand why these warriors abandon their vows to humanity and embrace the ruinous powers, we must examine the circumstances that drive such decisions and the forces that might compel them to seek a way back. The origins of this tragedy lie in the inherent contradictions of the Imperium of man. Created to be the ultimate defenders of humanity, the Space Marines are subjected to a life of unyielding duty and unrelenting war. This existence is defined by a strict hierarchy, rigid doctrines, and an expectation of absolute loyalty. Yet, this very rigidity creates cracks in the foundation. Many of these warriors are drawn from the most desperate and violent corners of human society, bringing with them their own ambitions, grievances, and flaws. While their transformation into Space Marines grants them immense power, it does not erase the scars of their past or their innate human vulnerabilities. The pressure of endless conflict and the weight of their purpose often leave Space Marines disillusioned. They are tasked with protecting an Imperium that is riddled with corruption, inefficiency, and hypocrisy. For some, this stark contrast between the ideals they were taught to uphold and the grim reality they witness fosters resentment and doubt. These emotions, left unchecked, create fertile ground for the whispers of chaos to take root. The ruinous powers exploit such vulnerabilities, offering answers to unspoken questions, power to overcome perceived injustices, or escape from the suffocating chains of duty. Beyond personal disillusionment, external forces play a significant role in their fall. The warp, an unpredictable and ever-present dimension of psychic energy, exerts an insidious influence on all who come into contact with it. Space Marines, who often travel through this volatile realm, are especially vulnerable to its effects. Exposure to the warp can warp perceptions, distort emotions, and erode the mental barriers that protect against temptation. Over time, even the most stalwart warrior can begin to question their faith and purpose, drawn to the tantalizing promises of the Chaos Gods. The promises of chaos are as diverse as the warriors who succumb to them. Some are lured by the prospect of forbidden knowledge or unparalleled power, believing that they can harness these gifts without losing themselves. Others are driven by a desire for revenge against an uncaring Imperium, a rival chapter, or even their own leaders. There are also those who fall prey to despair, seeking solace in chaos when all other hope seems lost. Whatever the motivation, the ruinous powers are adept at presenting themselves as the solution to every fear, doubt, or desire. For some, the decision to embrace chaos is not immediate but gradual. It begins with a single compromise, a decision made in desperation or anger, and spirals into full corruption over time. Each act of defiance against the Imperium, each moment of indulgence in the gifts of chaos, reinforces their bond with the warp. The more they rely on the powers granted by chaos, the harder it becomes to imagine life without them. Yet, even amidst this descent, the question of return lingers. For every warrior who fully embraces their new reality, there are others who regret their choices, haunted by the lives they left behind. The possibility of a way back from chaos is shaped by the same forces that led to the fall. Just as disillusionment, ambition, and despair drive some to turn against the Imperium, these emotions can also inspire a desire for redemption. A warrior who sees the destructive consequences of their actions may begin to question the cost of their allegiance. Similarly, The realization that the gifts of chaos come with insidious strings attached can sow seeds of doubt. The ruinous powers are not benevolent patrons, but cruel and capricious entities, and even the most loyal servant can find themselves discarded or tormented on a whim. The isolation and fragmentation of the Chaos Space Marines also play a role in this dynamic. Many operate in small war bands, far from the influence of their original legions. Without the constant reinforcement of Chaos's dominance, some begin to reflect on their choices, seeking meaning or identity beyond their current path. This process is fraught with challenges, as the grip of chaos is not easily broken. The gods do not release their servants willingly, and the path to redemption is littered with obstacles both internal and external. Despite these possibilities, the question of return is complicated by the nature of the Imperium itself. For those who regret their fall, the Imperium offers no forgiveness. Heresy is met with execution or excommunication, leaving no safe haven for those who might seek atonement. This harsh reality forces many would-be redeemers to remain in the shadows, struggling to reconcile their actions with their desire for redemption. For others, the lack of a clear path back reinforces their commitment to chaos, as they see no alternative but to continue on their current course. In the end, the forces that drive a Chaos Space Marine to fall and those that might inspire them to return are two sides of the same coin. Ambition, despair, and disillusionment push them toward chaos, while regret, reflection, and a yearning for lost ideals can draw them back. Yet, the journey in either direction is fraught with peril, defined by the brutal realities of a galaxy where forgiveness is scarce, and the power of chaos is as seductive as it is destructive. This delicate balance between despair and hope sets the stage for the ongoing struggle of these fallen warriors and the rare glimmers of redemption that persist within the darkness. The journey of the Chaos Space Marines unfolds through distinct stages, each marked by critical developments that shape their existence and deepen their connection to the ruinous powers. This narrative spans from their initial break with the Imperium to their ongoing struggle for dominance, survival, and for some, redemption. Each stage represents a step further into the grasp of chaos, or in rare cases, a tentative move toward breaking free. The first stage begins with their divergence from the Imperium, often characterized by growing dissatisfaction and alienation. This period is one of doubt and internal conflict, as these warriors question the values of the Imperium and the constraints placed upon them. For some, this phase is punctuated by small acts of rebellion or moments of moral compromise. For others, it is a slow erosion of faith, catalyzed by traumatic events or perceived betrayal. While the reasons vary, the outcome is consistent. These Astartes begin to reject their loyalty to the Emperor and seek new paths to power or purpose. The second stage sees the initial contact with chaos. During this time, these disillusioned warriors are introduced to the warp and the ruinous powers, often through subtle whispers or seemingly chance encounters. This stage is defined by experimentation and exploration, as the Space Marines tentatively accept the gifts of chaos, believing they can control or limit their influence. At first, the changes are minor, enhancements to strength, speed, or cunning, enough to give them an edge without fully altering their identity. However, this stage inevitably sets the foundation for deeper corruption. As the bonds with chaos strengthen, the third stage emerges, full allegiance to the ruinous powers. This is a period of transformation where the Chaos Space Marines openly embrace their new masters and shed their ties to the Imperium. Their appearances, beliefs, and methods become increasingly unrecognizable as they devote themselves fully to their chosen patrons. War bands consolidate during this phase, forming new alliances or fracturing into smaller, more fanatical groups. The warp's influence grows more pronounced, with physical and mental mutations becoming common. At this point, the warriors often believe they have gained ultimate freedom, unaware that they are already bound by the will of chaos. The fourth stage brings consolidation and domination. Chaos Space Marines begin asserting their power across the galaxy, carving out realms of influence and waging war against both the Imperium and each other. This period is marked by grand conquests, devastating raids, and the establishment of bastions within the Eye of Terror or other warp-tainted regions. The Chaos Space Marines revel in their new roles as Lords of Destruction, amassing followers, resources, and demonic allies. However, this stage also reveals the underlying fragility of their existence. Rivalries, mistrust, and the unpredictable nature of chaos lead to constant infighting, making lasting unity impossible. As time progresses, the fifth stage emerges, the realization of chaos's true cost. For many Chaos Space Marines, the gifts of the warp begin to feel more like chains. The gods they serve reveal their fickle and punishing nature, demanding greater sacrifices and loyalty while offering diminishing returns. This stage is marked by an internal reckoning, as some begin to question their choices and the price they have paid. For others, it is a descent into despair, as they accept their fate as tools of chaos, unable to envision any alternative. The physical and mental toll of prolonged exposure to the warp becomes undeniable, leaving many trapped in a cycle of service and suffering. The sixth stage, rare and deeply fraught, is the pursuit of redemption or freedom. For those Chaos Space Marines who regret their choices, this phase involves an often futile attempt to escape the grip of chaos. Whether through self-imposed exile, rebellion against their former masters, or a desperate search for absolution, this stage is defined by a struggle against overwhelming odds. The path is perilous, as both Chaos and the Imperium view such individuals as enemies to be eliminated. Few survive this stage, and fewer still succeed in finding any semblance of peace or redemption. These stages do not occur in a strict sequence, nor do they affect every Chaos Space Marine in the same way. Some remain firmly entrenched in their allegiance to chaos, never reaching the later stages of doubt or redemption. Others oscillate between loyalty and defiance, unable to fully commit to either path. The journey is as varied as the individuals who undertake it, shaped by their unique circumstances, choices, and the ever-shifting tides of the warp. In the broader context of the galaxy, these stages reflect the cyclical and self-perpetuating nature of chaos. Each new generation of traders follows a similar path, driven by the same flaws and temptations that ensnared their predecessors. The influence of the ruinous powers ensures that the cycle continues, drawing in fresh converts even as it destroys those who came before. This unrelenting pattern underscores the pervasive and inescapable nature of chaos, making the question of escape or redemption all the more poignant. While the stages of corruption and servitude are well documented, the rare instances of defiance and redemption offer a glimmer of hope. These moments remind us that, despite the overwhelming power of chaos, the capacity for choice remains. Whether this choice is enough to break the cycle is a question that lingers as the Chaos Space Marines continue to navigate the treacherous path between darkness and light. Each stage, from the initial doubts to the rare pursuit of freedom, shapes their identity and determines the course of their existence in a galaxy consumed by war and despair. The pivotal moment in the narrative of Chaos Space Marines revolves around the realization of what chaos truly is and the individual choice to accept or reject its dominion. This key turning point often comes not at the moment of their fall, but in the wake of prolonged exposure to the realities of chaos, a moment where the illusions and promises of the ruinous powers shatter against the brutal truth of servitude, corruption, and eternal damnation. It is here that the question of whether there is a way back from chaos is answered, not universally, but individually. A chaos seduces with the promise of power, freedom, and fulfillment of deeply personal desires. In its early stages, it offers the illusion of control, the belief that one can wield the gifts of the gods while remaining independent. However, over time, the true cost of these gifts becomes evident. The mutations, demonic possession, and endless wars waged in Chaos's name erode the identity of the individual, replacing ambition and purpose with mindless servitude. For some, this slow degradation culminates in a single defining moment, a crisis of self-awareness. The key event in this journey often occurs when a Chaos Space Marine witnesses or experiences the betrayal of Chaos itself. This could take many forms, the gods turning on a favored champion, a trusted ally consumed by mutation, or a warband obliterated by the very demons they summoned. These moments expose the inherent futility of serving Chaos. Unlike the rigid oppression of the Imperium, Chaos does not enforce loyalty, it extracts it through coercion and deceit. The realization that their supposed freedom is nothing more than another form of enslavement is a profound shock to those who once believed they could control their destiny. This moment of clarity is the fulcrum upon which the question of redemption turns. Some Chaos Space Marines, upon reaching this point, fully embrace their role as instruments of destruction. They see no path forward, but to continue serving their dark masters, either out of fear or because they no longer recognize the possibility of an alternative. For others, this is the moment where doubt becomes action, where the faint spark of humanity buried within them ignites a desire to break free. The decision to reject Chaos is fraught with nearly insurmountable challenges. The gods of the warp do not willingly relinquish their hold over those they have claimed. To turn against Chaos is to invite its wrath, the stripping away of power, the agony of psychic torment, and the relentless pursuit of demons and other servants of the ruinous powers. Furthermore, the Imperium offers no sanctuary for those seeking redemption. Even if a Chaos Space Marine manages to sever their ties to the warp, they are still branded as traitors and heretics, with death as the only reward for their efforts. Yet, despite these obstacles, there are moments where the desire to atone outweighs the fear of retribution. These rare cases are often marked by a singular act of defiance, a moment where the individual casts aside their allegiance to Chaos and attempts to reclaim their identity. This could involve the destruction of a demonic artifact, the refusal to carry out a particularly heinous order, or even a direct confrontation with their former masters. These acts, while small in the grand scheme of the galaxy, represent monumental shifts for the individuals who undertake them. The possibility of a way back from Chaos is not just a matter of rejecting the ruinous powers. It is also about confronting the internal scars left by years of servitude. For many, the psychological and emotional toll of their actions under Chaos's influence is as daunting as the external threats they face. The memories of atrocities committed, the lives destroyed, and the bonds severed weigh heavily on those who seek redemption. This internal struggle is the true battleground for these individuals as they grapple with whether they deserve forgiveness and whether they can forgive themselves. The answer to whether there is a way back from Chaos lies in the rarity of these moments and the choices made within them. The overwhelming majority of Chaos Space Marines remain bound to the ruinous powers, either through fear, complacency, or the belief that there is no alternative. But for the few who dare to resist, the path is not one of return, but of reinvention. They cannot go back to the Imperium, nor can they fully undo the damage caused by their actions. Instead, their redemption lies in creating a new path, one that rejects both the oppression of the Imperium and the corruption of Chaos. These acts of rebellion against Chaos are not grand revolutions, but deeply personal decisions. They rarely affect the broader state of the galaxy, but they hold immense significance for the individuals who make them. In the vast and unrelenting darkness of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, these moments of defiance are glimmers of light, reminders that even in the face of overwhelming odds, choice and agency remain. Ultimately, the key event in the story of Chaos Space Marines is not their initial fall, but their reckoning with the consequences of that fall. It is a moment of self-awareness where they confront the reality of their servitude and decide whether to accept it or fight against it. This moment does not guarantee redemption. It is merely the first step in a long and arduous journey. But it is in this moment that the question of whether a way back exists is answered, not by the galaxy at large, but by each individual who dares to defy the gods they once served. If Chaos Space Marines were to return from the clutches of the ruinous powers, the consequences for the galaxy would be both profound and unpredictable. Such a change would reverberate across the Imperium, the Warp, and the myriad factions of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, fundamentally altering the dynamics of power and the nature of the eternal conflict. The impact would depend on the scale of this return, whether it involves isolated individuals or entire warbands. Regardless, the implications would be immense. The most immediate effect would be on the morale and ideology of the Imperium. The return of even a single Chaos Space Marine could challenge deeply entrenched doctrines. The Imperium's stance on heresy is absolute. Any association with chaos is considered irredeemable, punishable by execution or annihilation. However, a chaos-tainted individual seeking redemption could force a re-evaluation of this uncompromising stance. If such a figure were to successfully demonstrate that redemption is possible, it might inspire hope among loyalists and sow doubt within the ranks of chaos. Conversely, it could also fracture Imperial cohesion, as many would see any tolerance of a former heretic as a betrayal of humanity's fundamental principles. At the same time, the Warp itself would be shaken by such a shift. The Chaos Gods thrive on the loyalty and service of their followers, feeding on the emotions and acts of those who serve them. A Chaos Space Marine abandoning their influence would represent a symbolic defeat for these entities, undermining their claim of ultimate power and control. This act could weaken their influence over other servants, planting seeds of rebellion among those who may have never considered defiance possible. However, the Chaos Gods are not beings that easily let go of their pawns. Their wrath would likely manifest in unpredictable ways, from targeting the repentant warrior with relentless vengeance to unleashing warp storms that could threaten entire sectors. For Chaos Space Marines who remain loyal to the ruinous powers, the defection of one of their own would be seen as a betrayal of the highest order. Such an act would invite reprisal from their former allies, as war bands seek to eliminate what they perceive as a dangerous threat to their unity and purpose. The renegade would become a hunted figure, pursued by both the servants of chaos and the forces of the Imperium. Their very existence would challenge the notion that allegiance to chaos is an eternal sentence, creating tension within warbands and legions. This could lead to internal strife, as some begin to question their own paths, potentially fragmenting the power of chaos-aligned forces. From a galactic perspective, the return of Chaos Space Marines would have strategic and military implications. Their knowledge of chaos, its weaknesses, and its strategies could be a powerful asset to the Imperium or any other faction willing to accept them. These individuals possess a unique understanding of the Warp, demonic entities, and the tactics of chaos warbands, knowledge that could be weaponized against their former masters. They could expose hidden warp routes, demonic rituals, or the vulnerabilities of chaos fortresses, shifting the balance in key conflicts. However, this knowledge would come at a cost, as their very presence would draw suspicion and hostility, limiting their ability to act freely. For the galaxy's other factions, such a change would provoke both interest and concern. Xenos races, particularly those with knowledge of the Warp, would recognize the significance of such a shift. Some, like the Eldar, might attempt to manipulate these individuals to further their own goals, while others, such as the Necrons, might view their return as a dangerous anomaly to be eradicated. The forces of chaos, on the other hand, would likely intensify their campaigns to demonstrate their unbroken dominance, unleashing waves of destruction in retaliation for any perceived loss of power or control. On a symbolic level, the return of Chaos Space Marines would challenge the fatalistic tone that dominates the galaxy. The Imperium is defined by its rigid belief in the inevitability of sacrifice and the impossibility of redemption. A successful return from chaos would upend this narrative, suggesting that even in the grim darkness of the far future, change is possible. It would raise questions about the nature of faith, loyalty, and the human spirit, inspiring both hope and fear across the galaxy. This shift in perspective could lead to renewed efforts to combat chaos, as factions see a glimmer of possibility where once there was only despair. Yet, the risks of such a return cannot be understated. Chaos is insidious, and the potential for betrayal remains ever present. Even those who seek redemption may carry the lingering influence of the ruinous powers, acting as unwitting agents of corruption or destruction. The Imperium's fear of such outcomes would likely lead to extreme measures, such as purging entire populations exposed to the returning warrior. This paranoia could exacerbate the already devastating toll of the Imperium's oppressive policies, creating additional suffering and instability. In the long term, the return of Chaos Space Marines could lead to new movements and ideologies. Within the Imperium, it might inspire breakaway factions that challenge the ecclesiarchy's authority, advocating for a more nuanced understanding of chaos and its impact on humanity. These movements could provoke civil unrest, sparking internal conflicts that weaken the Imperium's ability to defend itself. For chaos, the loss of loyal servants could force the ruinous powers to adapt, potentially creating new strategies or unleashing even more devastating forces to maintain their dominance. Ultimately, the return of Chaos Space Marines would represent a turning point in the galaxy's eternal conflict. It would test the limits of loyalty, faith, and redemption, revealing both the strengths and weaknesses of the factions involved. Whether this shift would lead to a brighter future or plunge the galaxy into even deeper darkness remains uncertain, but it would undoubtedly reshape the course of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The question of whether Chaos Space Marines can find a way back from chaos is one of the most fascinating and hotly debated topics within the Warhammer 40,000 community. Central to the discussion are the unique aspects of their condition, how chaos manifests, what it demands of its servants, and the philosophical and practical challenges of escaping its influence. This debate touches on lore, morality, and even the metaphysical rules of the universe, sparking countless theories and interpretations. One of the most debated aspects revolves around the nature of chaos itself. Is chaos an external force that imposes its will on individuals, or is it a reflection of the inner flaws and desires of sentient beings? Some fans argue that chaos is ultimately an extension of the psyche, a manifestation of the emotions and ambitions of those it corrupts. If this is true, then redemption may be possible through self-discipline, repentance, and the rejection of those darker impulses. Others believe chaos is a primal force that overrides personal agency once an individual falls under its sway. In this interpretation, the grip of chaos is nearly absolute, and escape would require an intervention beyond mortal power. Another key aspect often discussed is the role of the warp in shaping the fate of Chaos Space Marines. The warp is a dimension of pure psychic energy, inherently tied to the emotions and thoughts of all sentient life. Chaos Space Marines are uniquely attuned to it, having spent centuries or even millennia immersed in its influence. This prolonged exposure often leaves physical and psychological scars that seem irreversible. Supporters of the idea that redemption is possible highlight rare examples of individuals who resisted or overcame this influence, arguing that such cases prove the warp's effects are not immutable. Skeptics, however, point to the overwhelming evidence of chaos's ability to warp and consume its followers entirely, leaving little room for recovery. The physical mutations and gifts of chaos are another focal point in the discussion. Chaos often rewards its followers with enhancements that come at a terrible cost, such as demonic appendages, psychic abilities, or immortality bound to the warp. These changes are not merely cosmetic. They fundamentally alter the individual on a molecular and even spiritual level. Fans question whether such transformations can ever be undone. Some propose that advanced technology or psychic intervention might reverse these changes, while others argue that these gifts are permanent marks of Chaos's dominion. The notion of redemption in this case becomes more symbolic, achieving mental or spiritual freedom without necessarily reversing the physical corruption. The concept of loyalty is another aspect that fans frequently explore. Many Chaos Space Marines originally turned to Chaos out of a sense of betrayal by the Imperium or disillusionment with their former purpose. This raises the question of whether loyalty to the Emperor or humanity can be reignited in those who have abandoned it. Some argue that the flames of loyalty may still burn deep within even the most corrupted individuals, waiting for the right circumstances to rekindle them. Others counter that the hatred and bitterness fostered over centuries of war and suffering make such a return impossible. In this view, even if a Chaos Space Marine were to reject Chaos, they would likely never align themselves with the Imperium again, instead becoming isolated renegades. One of the most polarizing points of discussion involves the role of free will. Chaos is often portrayed as an all-consuming force, but many fans debate the extent to which its followers retain agency. Are Chaos Space Marines fully enslaved to the will of the ruinous powers, or do they maintain a degree of autonomy? Those who support the possibility of redemption argue that as long as some shred of free will remains, a path back is conceivable, no matter how narrow. On the other hand, those who see Chaos as absolute believe that the influence of the ruinous powers inevitably eclipses any individual agency, ensuring that all servants of Chaos are irredeemably bound to their masters. Another dimension of the debate is the role of the Imperium in preventing or facilitating redemption. The Imperium's zero-tolerance stance on heresy and its refusal to acknowledge the possibility of rehabilitation create significant obstacles for any Chaos Space Marine seeking to return. Some fans argue that this rigidity is a necessary evil, as allowing even one former heretic to reintegrate could open the door to widespread corruption. Others believe this stance is short-sighted, preventing the Imperium from leveraging potential allies or learning from the experiences of those who have walked both paths. This tension between pragmatism and ideology fuels much of the discourse surrounding the topic. Fans also frequently discuss the few canonical examples of individuals who defied Chaos, using them as evidence for or against the possibility of redemption. Some point to stories of individuals who turned against the ruinous powers, even if they ultimately met tragic ends, as proof that the grip of Chaos is not unbreakable. Others emphasize the rarity and cost of such acts, suggesting they are the exception rather than the rule. These examples spark deeper questions about the nature of the Warhammer 40,000 universe itself. Is it a setting where hope can exist, or is it one of inevitable decay and damnation? The symbolism of chaos and redemption adds another layer to the discussion. Chaos represents freedom, power, and indulgence, but also corruption, decay, and self-destruction. Redemption, by contrast, is seen as a return to discipline, sacrifice, and order. Fans often debate whether such a dichotomy inherently limits the possibility of redemption. Does rejecting chaos mean embracing the Imperium's oppressive doctrines, or is there a middle ground? This question invites speculation about alternative paths, where individuals could reject both chaos and the Imperium, seeking a new purpose entirely. Finally, the topic inspires philosophical debates about the broader themes of Warhammer 40,000. The universe thrives on cycles of conflict, and many fans question whether breaking the cycle is even desirable. If Chaos Space Marines could truly return, it would challenge one of the core pillars of the setting, the notion that choices have irreversible consequences. Some fans welcome this possibility, arguing that it adds depth and complexity to the lore. Others feel it would undermine the grim and unrelenting tone that defines Warhammer 40,000. These unique aspects of Chaos Space Marines and their potential redemption remain a source of endless fascination for the community. Each perspective offers valuable insight into the nature of chaos, humanity, and the eternal struggle at the heart of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, ensuring the debate will continue to thrive. Among the Chaos Space Marines, certain individuals stand out as figures who might conceivably turn away from chaos, either because of lingering doubts, personal tragedy, or an unyielding sense of purpose that conflicts with the demands of the ruinous powers. These individuals, despite their corruption, possess qualities that set them apart from the masses of Chaos's followers and suggest a potential, however remote, for rejecting the path they have taken. Their stories are a mix of strength, ambition, and tragedy, woven with the complexities of loyalty, betrayal, and identity. One such figure is an aspiring champion known for his tactical brilliance and unshakable sense of honor, even in the service of chaos. Unlike many of his peers who embrace the freedom and excesses of chaos without restraint, this warrior remains disciplined and focused, pursuing his goals with a precision that borders on obsession. His dedication to order within his warband and his strict adherence to his personal code often place him at odds with the more anarchic elements of chaos. While he has used the gifts of the ruinous powers to further his ambitions, there is a growing tension between his belief in structure and the inherently chaotic nature of his masters. His internal conflict leaves him questioning whether the power he has gained is worth the price he continues to pay, and his rigid sense of self might one day drive him to seek an alternative path. Another intriguing personality is a sorcerer whose thirst for knowledge led him into the embrace of chaos. Initially, his desire for understanding outweighed any concern for morality, and the secrets of the warp offered answers that the Imperium denied him. However, as his mastery of sorcery grew, so too did his awareness of the dangers it posed. Unlike many of his kind, who are consumed by their lust for power, this sorcerer possesses a cautious intellect and an ability to reflect on the consequences of his actions. While he continues to serve chaos to further his studies, he harbors a quiet but persistent fear of losing himself entirely to the entities he seeks to control. His remarkable insight into the warp and his capacity for self-reflection set him apart as a figure who might one day reject the forces he has spent his life mastering. A third figure is a Chaos Lord whose motivations are deeply personal rather than ideological. Unlike those who turn to chaos out of ambition or disillusionment, his fall was driven by the desire to avenge a grievous betrayal. His quest for vengeance led him to make a pact with chaos, granting him the strength to destroy his enemies, but the victory was hollow. In the aftermath, he found himself bound to a power he no longer wanted and tormented by the memory of what he had sacrificed. Despite his outward bravado and the respect he commands within his warband, he is haunted by guilt and regret, and his desire for atonement burns beneath his corrupted exterior. His fierce determination and personal charisma make him a formidable leader, but they also hint at the potential to channel these qualities toward a different, perhaps redemptive, purpose. A more tragic example is a veteran of countless wars who has grown weary of the endless cycle of destruction. This warrior is a pragmatist, one who initially saw chaos as a means to an end, a way to survive and thrive in a galaxy ruled by cruelty and conflict. Over time, however, the cost of this survival has worn him down. Unlike many of his brethren who revel in carnage, he fights not for glory or bloodlust, but out of a sense of obligation to his warband and his survival instincts. His growing disillusionment with the futility of his existence has led him to question the very foundations of his allegiance, though he lacks a clear vision of an alternative. His resilience and adaptability are his greatest strengths, but his lack of direction leaves him vulnerable to the manipulations of both chaos and those who might seek to exploit his doubts. There is also the tale of an enigmatic renegade who operates on the fringes of the Chaos Space Marine community. Shrouded in mystery, this figure is known for striking against both Imperial and Chaos forces with equal ferocity. His motivations remain unclear, but his actions suggest a deep contempt for the gods of chaos and their servants. While his methods are brutal and his appearance bears the unmistakable mark of chaos corruption, his choice of targets and his cryptic messages hint at a desire to undermine the very powers he once served. His independence and strategic cunning make him a dangerous enemy, but they also position him as a potential ally to those who would oppose chaos. However, his shadowy nature and the secrets he guards make it difficult to discern whether his actions stem from a genuine desire for redemption or a more selfish agenda. Finally, there are those Chaos Space Marines who act as reluctant leaders, burdened by the expectations of their warbands and the demands of the gods they serve. These individuals often possess a sense of responsibility or loyalty to their followers, which can conflict with their personal desires. While they continue to lead their forces in the name of chaos, they are acutely aware of the cost paid by their warriors and the futility of their existence. Their ability to inspire loyalty and command respect speaks to their strength of character, but their internal conflict suggests that they may one day seek a different path, not for themselves, but for the sake of those who follow them. These figures, with their unique qualities and inner struggles, exemplify the complexity of the Chaos Space Marines. They are not merely mindless servants of the ruinous powers, but individuals with distinct motivations, strengths, and weaknesses. Their potential to turn away from chaos lies in their ability to reflect on their actions, confront their fears, and overcome the forces that bind them. While their paths are fraught with peril, they serve as a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, the spark of humanity endures. The subject of whether Chaos Space Marines can return from the grip of chaos is rife with unresolved questions and theories that continue to spark debate among fans and scholars of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These mysteries delve into the metaphysical, philosophical, and narrative complexities of chaos and its relationship with its mortal servants, raising issues that remain unanswered in the lore. Each question opens a doorway to further speculation, adding depth to the eternal struggle between light and darkness. One of the most discussed mysteries is whether Chaos Space Marines retain any fragment of their original humanity after prolonged exposure to the warp. The ruinous powers are infamous for twisting both body and mind, reshaping their followers into instruments of their will. This has led to the question of whether a Chaos Space Marine can ever truly think or act independently once they have fallen. Some theorize that deep within the corrupted exterior, traces of the warrior they once were still remain, buried under layers of mutation and mental conditioning. Others argue that chaos's influence is total, erasing the original identity and replacing it entirely with the will of the warp. The implications of this question are significant, as the possibility of redemption may hinge on whether there is anything left to redeem. Another fascinating enigma revolves around the physical corruption caused by chaos. The mutations and gifts bestowed upon its followers are not just marks of allegiance, but manifestations of the warp's influence on the material realm. This raises the question, can these changes be reversed? If Chaos Space Marines were to reject their masters, would their bodies revert to their original forms, or are these transformations permanent? Some fans speculate that advanced technology, psychic intervention, or even divine intervention could restore their physical forms. Others believe that these mutations are an indelible part of their being, tied so deeply to their essence that they can never be undone. This uncertainty creates a tension between the desire for redemption and the physical reality of what it might entail. The role of the warp itself in determining the fate of Chaos Space Marines is another unresolved issue. The warp is both a source of power and a prison, a place where time and reality bend in impossible ways. This raises the question of whether escape from chaos is a matter of willpower, or if the warp has its own rules that prevent such defiance. Some theories suggest that the warp actively resists any attempt at redemption, binding its servants through contracts, curses, or metaphysical chains. Others propose that the warp is indifferent, allowing those with sufficient strength and determination to break free. This duality between the warp as a malevolent force and a neutral energy field fuels ongoing debate about the feasibility of breaking its hold. The motivations of the chaos gods themselves add another layer of complexity to this topic. These deities are not monolithic. Each has its own agenda and methods for maintaining power. This raises the intriguing question of whether the Chaos Gods would allow their followers to defect under certain circumstances. Would one god permit a servant to turn away in exchange for weakening a rival's influence, or is the loyalty of their champions an absolute requirement? The notion that the Chaos Gods might manipulate such defections for their own purposes adds a layer of unpredictability to the discussion. It suggests that even an act of rebellion against chaos might play into a larger, more insidious game orchestrated by these entities. There is also a persistent question about the role of faith and belief in the potential redemption of Chaos Space Marines. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, faith has immense power, shaping reality through sheer conviction. This raises the possibility that a Chaos Space Marine who genuinely repents and places their faith in a higher cause, be it the Emperor, humanity, or even a personal code, might find a way to break free from chaos. However, this theory is not without its challenges. Faith alone may not be enough to counteract the tangible and metaphysical ties binding them to the warp, especially if their physical corruption makes them anathema to the Imperium or other potential allies. The concept of time within the warp further complicates the issue. The warp does not adhere to linear time, meaning that a Chaos Space Marine could experience centuries of corruption in what might be mere moments in real space. This raises the question of whether the passage of time diminishes their chances of redemption. If a warrior has spent millennia serving chaos, would they even remember their former life? Or would their identity be so deeply eroded that redemption becomes impossible? Conversely, could the non-linear nature of the warp allow for strange and unexpected reversals, where a moment of clarity or regret resets their path entirely? The interplay between time, memory, and identity within the warp remains one of the most perplexing aspects of this topic. A particularly controversial theory centers on the idea that redemption might come not through defiance of chaos, but through a deeper understanding of it. Some fans speculate that chaos is not inherently evil, but a natural force that can be balanced or harnessed without falling into corruption. This idea suggests that a Chaos Space Marine might return not by rejecting chaos entirely, but by mastering it in a way that transcends the binary conflict between the ruinous powers and the Imperium. However, this perspective is highly divisive, as it challenges the foundational themes of Warhammer 40,000, where chaos is portrayed as an existential threat rather than a neutral force. The final unresolved question concerns the impact of a successful redemption on the broader galaxy. If a Chaos Space Marine were to truly return, what would it mean for the factions and ideologies that define the Warhammer 40,000 universe? Would it inspire others to seek redemption, creating a ripple effect that weakens Chaos's hold over its servants? Or would it provoke a backlash with the Chaos Gods and the Imperium alike, intensifying their efforts to suppress such acts? The potential consequences of redemption, both personal and galactic, remain a tantalizing mystery, adding weight to the question of whether such a path is possible. These unresolved questions and theories form the core of the ongoing fascination with Chaos Space Marines and their potential for redemption. Each mystery invites further exploration, ensuring that this topic remains one of the most intriguing and debated aspects of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The long-term implications of Chaos Space Marines finding a way back from chaos would be monumental, altering the balance of power, the philosophies of the galaxy's factions, and the narrative trajectory of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. If redemption were proven possible, it would introduce unprecedented challenges and opportunities for all factions, reshaping the eternal struggle between chaos and order. Whether this shift would lead to a brighter future or greater instability depends on how such redemption unfolds and how the galaxy reacts to it. For the Imperium, the return of Chaos Space Marines would force a fundamental reevaluation of its core beliefs. The Imperium's rigid dogma is built on the idea that heresy is irredeemable and that all who fall to chaos must be exterminated without mercy. The proven possibility of redemption would challenge this uncompromising stance, creating friction within the ecclesiarchy, Inquisition, and other institutions. While some would see these returning warriors as a potential asset in the fight against chaos, others would view them as a threat to the Imperium's ideological purity. This internal conflict could destabilize the Imperium, as debates over how to handle these individuals could lead to schisms, power struggles, and even civil war. At the same time, the return of Chaos Space Marines would have profound implications for the Imperium's military strategy. These warriors possess unique knowledge of the warp, chaos rituals, and the tactics of their former allies. If their defection were embraced, they could provide invaluable intelligence, bolstering the Imperium's ability to counter chaos incursions and navigate warp phenomena. However, their reintegration would also be fraught with risk, as their presence could invite distrust and even sabotage if their motives were questioned. This tension between the potential benefits and dangers of their return would shape the Imperium's approach to war for centuries to come. For chaos itself, the loss of loyal servants would represent a significant blow. The ruinous powers thrive on the devotion and deeds of their followers, and the defection of Chaos Space Marines would challenge their perceived invincibility. Such defections could inspire others within the ranks of Chaos to question their allegiance, leading to increased instability among warbands and legions. This fragmentation might weaken Chaos in the short term, as internal divisions and defections disrupt their campaigns. However, the Chaos Gods are adaptive and ruthless, and their response to these losses could result in even more aggressive and destructive efforts to reassert their dominance. The defection of Chaos Space Marines could also lead to a shift in the balance of power within the warp. The ruinous powers are not a unified force, and their rivalries often define the actions of their followers. If one god were perceived as losing influence due to these defections, it could provoke a power struggle within the warp itself, intensifying conflicts between demonic factions. This might manifest in the material galaxy as an increase in warp storms, demonic incursions, and unpredictable events, adding to the already precarious state of the universe. For the galaxy's other factions, the return of Chaos Space Marines would be both an opportunity and a threat. Xenos races like the Eldar might see these defectors as a chance to weaken Chaos's grip on the galaxy, potentially forming temporary alliances or exploiting their knowledge for their own purposes. However, other factions, such as the Orcs or Necrons, might view these returning warriors as no different from their corrupted counterparts, targeting them with the same ferocity as they do other Chaos-aligned forces. This uncertainty about how different factions would react adds another layer of complexity to the potential consequences of redemption. On a broader scale, the demonstrated possibility of returning from chaos would have a profound psychological impact on the galaxy. For millennia, the narrative of Warhammer 40,000 has been defined by the inevitability of corruption and the permanence of damnation. If Chaos Space Marines could return, it would inject a rare glimmer of hope into this otherwise bleak universe. This shift in perspective could inspire new movements and ideologies as people across the galaxy begin to question the inevitability of Chaos's dominance. However, it could also provoke paranoia and fear as the presence of redeemed individuals blurs the line between friend and foe, making it harder to distinguish between true allies and hidden threats. The long-term cultural impact on the Imperium would be particularly significant. The idea of redemption might lead to the formation of splinter groups or reformist factions within the Imperium, advocating for more flexible approaches to dealing with heretics and traitors. These movements could gain traction among those disillusioned with the Imperium's harsh methods, potentially leading to a period of ideological and political upheaval. On the other hand, such movements could also provoke a violent backlash from traditionalists, resulting in purges, repression, and the solidification of the Imperium's authoritarian rule. For Chaos Space Marines themselves, the prospect of redemption would alter the trajectory of their warbands and legions. Those who remain loyal to Chaos might redouble their efforts to prove their devotion, fearing that any hint of doubt could lead to their downfall. At the same time, warbands could become more fragmented as individuals within their ranks begin to question their allegiance. This internal discord could weaken Chaos's overall effectiveness, making it harder for them to mount large-scale campaigns against the Imperium or other factions. In the grander scheme, the possibility of redemption would challenge the philosophical underpinnings of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. This is a setting defined by extremes: the unyielding faith of the Imperium, the unrestrained chaos of the warp, and the existential despair of a galaxy in constant conflict. The return of Chaos Space Marines would introduce nuance to this dichotomy, suggesting that even in the darkest corners of existence, change is possible. This shift could redefine the tone of the universe, making it less about inevitable decay and more about the struggle for transformation, no matter how difficult or unlikely. Ultimately, the long-term consequences of Chaos Space Marines finding a way back from chaos would be a mix of hope and peril. It would create new opportunities for alliances, strategies, and ideological shifts, but it would also introduce new conflicts, uncertainties, and risks. The galaxy, already teetering on the edge of destruction, would face a new era of unpredictability, where the lines between loyalty and heresy, hope and despair, are blurred more than ever before. Whether this leads to a brighter future or deeper darkness remains an open question, but the impact of such a change would be felt for millennia to come.